Right, this video is a brief introduction to some of the new features that I've added to the LXR with my custom firmware that I've been working on. So starting up, I've got a fresh SD card with the default kits from sonicpotions.com. The only thing I've changed from that SD card image that you can download from Sonic Potions is I've put my new custom firmware on there. The custom firmware, you can get it either from GitHub or from my website, brandonclark.com, with the link down in the comments. This firmware isn't trying to change anything that you can do with the LXR. It's fully compatible with any of the data files from the stock firmware. There's just some added things that you can do. So starting up, you can see we're on version 0.37, so we've got the new updates with that, the latest version of the stock firmware with the new filter model. So we'll go through the options. The new global options, the new load save menu, the new performance options, and the new voice options. Again, just in general, and then I'll do some specific videos on what to do with the new things in the custom firmware. So first, taking a look at the global menu, there's 3 additions here. The first one of those is pattern change instant. So if you leave this off, pattern change works just as it does in the stock firmware. If you start up the sequencer, it happens only at the end of the bar. But if we go back into the menu and change that, now the pattern change happens instantaneously at the end of a step rather than the end of the bar. But there being 128 steps, it happens instantaneously. You'll notice that the sequencer position doesn't change when it does that. So we've got basically legato mode pattern switching. So you can switch to any pattern keeping the same pattern position. And if we go back into the global menu, the next thing that I've added is bank to performance. So I'll explain a bit more about that in a video specifically on the new MIDI options for the custom firmware. But the short explanation of that is if you send a bank change message to the LXR, you can select whether you want it to change the kit. So if we leave that off, a bank change message changes the kit. If we turn that on, then a bank change message will change the performance. So you can load a new performance file by sending a bank change message. So that loads the kit and your pattern set. Going back, the final global option is a shift toggle. So that's pretty simple. Normally shift is a momentary button. If we turn shift toggle on, then shift works as toggle. So that's it for the global menu. If we take a look at the load menu, the main new thing is you can load individual drum voices now. So if we load up drum voice 1, we'll stop the sequencer so we can preview those. There's the kick drum for the Slack kit. You'll notice that I've also added the option to preview drum voices. If you press the voice select button of the drum voice you've already selected, then it gives you a preview for that sound. You'll notice that this doesn't work with the sequencer running, so you don't inadvertently start triggering voices with the sequencer. You can, of course, always use the roll, though. So if we go back to drum 1, if we're on individual voice select, we can select a drum from any kit, so we can mix and match different kits. Right, so the save menu, I haven't changed very much about that. The main change that I've made is the knobs are slightly different now. So if you go into the save menu, the first knob changes the save type, as it always has. The second knob changes the cursor position. And what I've done is, rather than have all the characters stacked on a single knob, I've spread them out between 2 knobs to make the resolution coarser. I had a big problem selecting individual characters with all the characters stacked on one knob. So here you've got all of the capital letters on the third knob at the very beginning of it, and then punctuation, and then it goes into numbers. And the fourth knob has the lowercase letters at the beginning of it, and then some different characters at the end. So it makes it a little easier to pick out an individual letter. Going on to the performance menu, this is where a lot of the changes that I've made show up. So here, instead of a single performance page, you've actually got 4 different pages. You can switch between the top 2 by pressing the button multiple times. You have 2 macros. I'll explain a bit more about that in a specific video on the performance section. And then you've got your shuffle and your roll rate, as you did in the stock firmware, and then 2 new options for rolls. You can select the note that it uses, and you can select the velocity that you want it to enter. Also, if you hold Shift, you'll see the pattern next options, and there's also a transpose option that's per voice that will let you change the pitch of the track. But I'll explain a bit more about that in a future video on the performance section. There's also, in the Shift Record menu, you have a few different options for the roll. The roll all is the default mode from the stock firmware, and then trigger ignores the roll settings from this screen, so it ignores note and velocity. It only triggers based on whatever data is in the sequencer. And then velocity, note, and both use only the sequencer active steps and use the note and the velocity from the performance menu. But I'll explain a little bit more about that and how to use it in a future video on the performance section. Going into the voice menu, there isn't much that I've added here, just 2 things. Under click, there's a scaling option, so you can slow down tracks individually. So if you want to have a slower, longer pattern for an individual drum voice, you can slow it down all the way down to 128 bars long. So that's 1 step is equal to 1 bar if you want a 128 bar long pattern. And the other thing that I've added to the voice menu is just a few different LFO waveforms. I'll explain a bit more about that in a future video as well. So that's about it for now. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, just hit me up in the comments or on the Sonic Potions forum, and yeah, check in with the future videos on some more detail about what you can do with this custom firmware for the LXR drum machine. All right, thanks very much, and thanks for watching.